Thank you. We were told the financial problems appeared suddenly, and the voices we heard at home, the voices that came from the walls, were due to a witchcraft spell that had been cast on us. Not just my mom. As we thought the spell was against the whole family, they wanted to get rid of all of us. Good evening, community. Thank you for your patience. Since there's a new episode on Friday, tonight we have a double-length episode. And also, of course, thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell you the following stories. Spirits in towns, witchcraft, apparitions on the road. You'll find this and more here today. If you're listening on your way home at night, please pay close attention to your surroundings. It could be you who sends us the next story. It could be you who is about to find out that the paranormal exists. Could you be the next protagonist of Night Tales? Let me tell you a story. It happened just a few weeks ago when Julio, my best friend, my cousin as I affectionately call him, invited me to stay for a few days in his town. During December holidays, 4 hours away, he always returns for his birthday, Christmas, New Year's, and whenever he has free time or any excuse. I'd already spent some holidays over there several times, back when our group of friends was bigger, in those times that seemed farther and farther away. When we made plans and took Chino's dad's truck without permission, sometimes with 6 of us, we'd throw a big party. In Julio's hometown, only his grandpa and aunt remained, but he kept returning for his childhood memories and loved ones who had passed away. He always used to tell us that. Then our group started getting smaller little by little, and in the end, only Julio and I are still in touch. The others drifted away, they went up north. Are they in jail or dead like most people our age back then? This December, he invited only me, even though we hadn't seen each other or even run into each other for several months. I don't have much family left, and I'd rather not be with those I do. I agreed this time. It wasn't just staying the night, but spending several days there. And honestly, I wanted to get away for a while. That day, I finished work and went straight to the bus station. I got here by bus at dawn. But that place, Julio's town, is so small that there's no bus stop. The bus wouldn't stop unless you asked it to. On that stretch, don't fall asleep or they'll leave you at the main town's bus terminal. More than an hour from there, and along the way, the drivers wouldn't stop at all because of the robberies. So I tried to stay awake the whole way until I saw the lights of the little town. A few hundred meters from the highway, I approached the driver and asked to get off, saying I was headed to that town. He looked at me with some disbelief or maybe even concern and stopped there on the highway without pulling over. I could barely get off because he didn't fully stop, and as soon as I touched the ground, he sped up again to quickly regain speed. I exited and crossed the highway. I took out my phone to let Julio know I was there, but I didn't have any signal, not even a single bar. I had completely forgotten that there was only a little bit of signal in the town, but there was none on the highway or on the path. It was really dark and you couldn't see anything at all. It was like I had my eyes closed. Entering the path, the town lights vanished from view for several hundred meters. I sent a message to Julio letting him know I was already there, that I was walking to his house. I hoped that as soon as there was signal, it would go through and he would come out and find me on the way, especially because people there don't know me. And it might have seemed strange to see a stranger. Arriving at midnight, I kept walking in the dark. You could hear the sounds of the countryside, of the deserted area, just the sounds of nature, nothing else. Far away, I heard a dog barking and realized I wasn't far from town. Behind me, on the road, there was nothing to be heard anymore. Finally, I could see ahead on the path, a light. Finally, I was about to reach a little house. I heard something from there. From behind the house, a silhouette came out walking toward me. By the side of the road, a boy about 11 years old, speaking softly, warned me not to walk that way, not to go into the town. He told me that something bad had just happened, that they were coming that way. He didn't tell me who it was. I told him I was looking for Julio, that I had to get to his house. "Come over here," he told me, and he headed toward the trees in the darkness, as if to get us away from the houses. I hesitated for a moment, but if there was trouble, if there were bad guys around, I knew things would go badly for me. And when I saw a silhouette running down the dark street from the village, I decided to follow the boy toward the trees. "Martin, stop, Martin." As I was about to catch up with the boy, I heard a voice running toward me, calling my name. It was my cousin Julio's. I went back to the road and saw him coming from the village. He was the silhouette. He had just received my message. I hugged him and asked him what had happened, if everything was all right. "He wanted to take you, didn't he?" he asked me. I told him the boy said something bad happened and asked me to follow him. He faked a smile and said there was no boy, telling me I was lucky he arrived in time. At that moment, I felt my stomach turn. I laughed because I was sure my cousin was joking, but I just looked at him. He sped up and told me to keep walking without looking back. When we arrived at his house, his grandpa was waiting and had dinner ready for me. When I arrived, I was about to ask about the boy, but Julio signaled me not to. A few days later, I was there and realized no boy like the one I saw was in the village. And there were so few houses, so few inhabitants that I know I would have noticed. The day I took my bus back to the city, my cousin walked me to the road. It was already getting dark when we left, and by the time we reached the part of the path where you can't see the town or road, night had fallen. He told me not to look toward the trees, to keep quiet and keep walking, and I just did as he said. I clearly heard someone walking next to us, but saw nothing. To many, this may seem unimportant, but now that Julio, my friend, my cousin, told me he's going to stay in his town for a while, that I should visit him more often. I feel like I'm going to lose the last friend I had left because I don't want to go back. You see, hi, I just started following you on Facebook, but your videos have been showing up for a long time. I really like them. That's why I decided to share my story here with you. I hope you read it. I know you might not believe this when you hear it, since I've only told a few friends and they just smile, thinking I'm lying. But there are more witnesses in my family. My brothers, my mother, and my father. We all experienced it. I could swear to you on anything that it was real. Just remembering it still scares me. I'm from Michoacan, from Zamora to be exact. This happened when I was about 12 years old, around 2017. We've always been a humble family. My parents worked day by day. We didn't have any luxuries or anything like that. We lived a simple life. My stepfather had been working for the same fruit export company for years. In April of that year, he was fired. In April of that year, he was fired, but they gave him a good severance package. My mom took over the mechanic shop where my uncle worked and my grandfather's belt and sandal workshop, where he also did hand embroidery. Things gradually improved and our lives became less rushed. But that didn't last very long because around July, some new neighbors moved in across from us. They quickly became friends with my parents after seeing we were doing well, and it seemed they were too. So they offered my mom to invest in a business, but my mom didn't accept. She said she was already satisfied with what she had, and even though they were small businesses, they gave her profits. They didn't think much of it. You could see it on their faces in the way they acted from that day on, since they stopped talking to us. But nobody took it to heart. These things happen, and well, Life went on as usual until one day everything started happening. It began as something minor, easily mistaken for something else. Strange noises started to be heard in the house, voices that seemed to come from inside the wall. Then they would lightly knock on the doors as if to get our attention, especially when we were alone. Even though that should have alarmed us, we didn't think those manifestations were that strong. Until one day, all of a sudden, my younger sister, who was 7 years old at the time, would wake up crying very loudly at night, saying that something was trying to pull her under the bed, that she saw a horrible face, a devil in the mirror. At first, we didn't believe her. We liked to scare ourselves with silly horror stories and thought they were just dreams or that she was making it up. Until one day, my grandmother saw it too. She witnessed that ugly, horrifying thing my sister had been seeing. That day, my sister had already gone to bed. My dad and my stepdad weren't there. They had gone out. My mom and my stepdad weren't there. They had gone out. My grandmother says that day she heard my sister crying really loudly, so she ran to her room, tried to open the door, and couldn't. She says it wouldn't open no matter how hard she pushed, as if something held it back. She thought my sister was locked in and crying, so she ran to the garden since all the rooms faced it. When she looked through the window and saw my sister, she realized she was still asleep, but she was crying in a very, very disturbing way. She says something made her turn to the wardrobe mirror, where she saw it filled with what looked like fog. And there was a horrible face, the face of a dark-skinned person, very dark, with eyes so deep that it seemed like if you looked at them, you would get lost, and some huge horns coming from its forehead. My grandmother only saw its face. She says she prayed, then ran and opened the door to get my sister out. And that was just the beginning of the misfortune that I still feel is chasing us. My grandmother told my mom what happened, and she took us to a woman who read cards and did cleansings. The lady said that someone who lived very close had put a curse on her, a very strong evil, so that everything would go wrong for her in every way. That little by little, that would finish her off one way or another, and she didn't necessarily have to die, but that curse would destroy everything, and the whole family would suffer the consequences. My mom didn't really believe what that lady told her, but as the days went by, misfortune kept coming more and more. My grandfather, who, as I told you, managed the huarache and belt business, fell from a pretty high place and broke his leg. He was hospitalized for a long time, and after he got out, he couldn't make belts or huaraches, so the business closed. My uncle, my mom's brother, who ran the mechanic shop, he started falling heavily into the vice of alcohol, and because of that, that business also started to decline. Downstairs at home, we kept hearing things, the voices calling us, the doors, footsteps, and more things like that. As things got worse, we left the house hoping those things would remain behind. But we were wrong, and it got worse because the phenomena got angry and started to intensify. My sister would wake up sleeping on the other side of the room. She said she felt like something was moving her, but she couldn't wake me up. One day, as I was going down the stairs, I clearly felt hands pushing me. I managed to grab the handrail, so I only got some scrapes. But that thing wanted to hurt us in any way it could. After that incident on the stairs, the nights went by normally, without any noises or my siblings crying. We thought everything was over, but the bad luck continued. We barely had enough money left just to eat. My mom and my stepdad fought a lot. It was bound to happen, but everything just kept getting worse in some way. Until one night, a night I will never forget, the most intense thing happened that I'm going to tell you about in this story. It was late, almost 11 by then. We all slept together downstairs where the living room was. That's where my siblings, my grandparents, my mom, and my stepdad all slept together. We slept on mattresses, beds, and couches on the floor. Were we scared after everything that happened before? That night we went to bed hoping it would be peaceful, until we heard a loud noise upstairs. It felt like someone was slamming the bedroom doors. I still wasn't asleep because of insomnia, and the adults weren't either because they were watching over us. Only my siblings were sleeping, but the loud noises woke them up. My sister started crying in a way that we could feel how scared she was. She cried desperately, saying, "He's coming and he's angry." We tried to calm her, saying it was just usual noises and nothing was coming, but this time was different. We heard someone coming down the stairs, but they weren't normal footsteps. They sounded heavy, like the hooves of an animal, a big animal, so much that you would imagine it was a bull coming down. The lights in the rooms became very dim, like when you turn something on that takes up part of the voltage. We weren't left in complete darkness, but the lights barely lit up. We turned to the staircase where the footsteps were coming from and saw a very tall figure that was halfway down. There, we all looked at it, looked at that thing that had been tormenting us, that horrible thing finally manifesting itself. It was a very tall man with very dark skin, completely black eyes, medium curly hair down to his shoulders, horns and hooves instead of feet. The one we call the devil just looked at us and smiled. I didn't see the others' reactions. I remember that I started crying out of fear. Along with my sister, we just hugged each other and cried. My grandmother started praying several prayers, but he just stayed on the stairs, so she started praying a prayer called the Magnificat. That's when we saw how his expression changed from a smile to anger. While my grandmother was praying, my grandmother was throwing holy water from there until that thing slowly went up, moving out of our sight, and we heard it leave. We heard such a loud, angry scream from outside the house that I could swear even the neighbors heard it. My grandmother placed salt and holy water by the door. Later, we woke up again. We could hear that thing scratching at the back door, the walls, as if it wanted to come in again, until, almost at dawn, everything calmed down. We couldn't believe what we had seen. We thought it had all been a nightmare until we went outside and saw the door was covered in scratches. And that day, my mom took us to see a woman again, this time a witch, who told her that what we saw was because our whole family had been cursed with a very strong spell, with very powerful witchcraft, done with objects from the cemetery. She made a protection for my siblings and me, and she told my mom to break the mirrors where that thing had been seen, where it was coming from. My mom took the mirrors off the wardrobe, put them in a black trash bag, and took them to some fields. She says that when she broke the mirrors inside the bag, it started to inflate as if it had air in it. Since then, we haven't seen that thing again, that devil, but bad luck seems to follow us. We still live well, we don't have so many financial problems, but a lot has happened in our family. It's hard not to think we're still haunted and part of the curse remains. I know this is a heavy topic. Witchcraft, even if you don't believe in it, always leaves some doubt and respect. Maybe that's for the best. What I'm going to ask you is that, especially with that, please don't let yourselves be influenced. Sometimes we feel like we're going through a rough patch, that everything goes wrong and it just keeps going and going and going. And we think it's because of witchcraft, a spell or a curse, that it's impossible to get out of it, and that it's impossible to get out of it. If you have a spiritual side, whatever it may be, lean on it a lot and please feel safe. I know that everything can be overcome, even though it takes time, patience, and work. You can get out of any rough patch. Believe me, don't get discouraged. We need you at your best. Before moving on to the next story, I'm going to remind you to subscribe, because a large percentage of our listeners aren't subscribed. Give yourselves the chance to be part of this community. You won't regret it, and now it's time to continue. We will travel to the United States to a highway in Kentucky and see what we find there. Or the Relatos de la Noche community. My name is Marco, and I want to share an experience I had in Kentucky in November 2018. I'm not trying to persuade anyone, just sharing my experience. I still haven't found a logical explanation for what happened that morning. Back then, I lived in a small city in Kentucky and played in a band. One night, we were hired to play at a wedding about an hour away from where I lived. Each band member used to arrive separately, but when a bandmate's car broke down, he asked for a ride, and I gladly agreed. I was especially happy because I had just bought my first SUV, a 2012 Ford Escape. It wasn't new, but it was mine, paid in full. Anyone who's owned something for the first time knows what that means. We finished playing around 1 in the morning as the musicians paid us. Because others were collecting the equipment, we didn't need to stay. I told my partner that we should leave. It was late, and we were clearly tired. Kentucky is a wooded state with many small, nearly forgotten towns. There are no major highways in those areas, just alternate 2-lane roads, one going and one coming back. I dropped my partner off at his house around 2:40 in the morning. To save time, I decided to take those back roads. I turned off the music and drove in complete silence. I was going about 40 miles per hour, even though the speed limit was 55. And the night was too dark. About 30 or 35 minutes from my house approximately, something passed very quickly on the left side of the truck. I couldn't make out what it was. I kept going. And that's when I saw something. A man was standing at the edge of the road. Man, it seemed strange to me. It was already past 3 in the morning when our eyes met. He raised his arm and signaled me to stop. At that moment, I felt something very strong. Something inside me told me not to stop, to keep going. And right then, the truck turned off, and it wasn't a normal malfunction. Everything died at the same time. The engine, the lights, the dashboard. Nothing was left on except the light from my cell phone. I heard noises around me, but didn't dare get out since I only had my phone, no flashlight. I tried to start the vehicle several times and nothing happened. I was about to open the door when, out of reflex, I turned on the high beams by pulling the lever for a second, and the road lit up. And there was the same man standing in front of the truck, his face completely covered in blood, and with an expression of fury impossible to describe. And I let go of the lever, everything went completely dark again, and then he started hitting the hood and kept hitting it. The blows were so strong that the truck shook violently, as if attacked by unnatural force. I closed my eyes and started to pray. I closed them again and again while I kept turning the key nonstop. Suddenly, the engine started. Without opening my eyes, I shifted the truck into gear and accelerated. Once it moved forward, I opened my eyes. The headlights illuminated the empty road. The headlights lit up the road, empty. It was so intense that I didn't notice the speed. I was already going almost 80 miles per hour and almost lost control on a curve. I managed to calm down when I found an exit to the interstate. As I merged onto the highway and saw other cars and truckers driving, I felt a deep sense of relief. I got home around 5 in the morning. It was only then that I realized something unsettling. I didn't know how long I had been stopped. Back there. Given the distance, I should have arrived sooner. The next day, when I went out to buy breakfast, I saw that the hood of the truck was smashed, as if someone had hit it repeatedly with a heavy object. Since my family asked me what had happened, I didn't tell them the truth. I told them that some drunk people had probably hit it by mistake. Months later, I passed by that road again, this time during the day. Still, I recognized the exact spot where it all happened. There's a very old 19th century church there, and next to it a cemetery. Nothing like that has ever happened to me again, and I never told anyone about it until today, to you. I live in a large city in a 1940s house. My wife and I have experienced some very strange things there, but that would be another story. Hello, Uriel. Good evening. I'm Adrian, 18, and have been a fan of your project for years. I found out about the channel thanks to my cousins, who showed me the video about the macabre story of the Berlanga family. Since then, I fell in love with your content, even though I've always been scared for some reason. I'm passionate about listening to the stories on the channel. Honestly, I never thought I'd have to write in about my own experience, but something happened to me recently. But it's something that I think deserves to exist in night stories. Something. It all started when my best friend, who has a food stand, asked me for help because of the busy season. The plan was perfect. In the afternoons, make good money, and when we finished, go to his house to play Gears of War 3 until dawn. On the first day, we finished selling at 11 at night, went back to his house, and started playing. Immediately, around 2 o'clock in the morning, we fell asleep, and shortly after, my nightmare began. I woke up exactly at 3:44 in the morning. I felt a terrible cold, something that chilled me to the bone, along with an overwhelming urge to vomit. I got up to find a jacket for the cold and went out to the bathroom in the yard. Goodbye. Suddenly I heard a terrifying wail outside the house, right outside. It was a heartbreaking sound. There was pain and anger in that scream. I can't explain the fear I felt. I tried to wake up my friend. I talked to him and shook him, but he wouldn't respond. He seemed to be in a deep sleep he couldn't get out of. I waited for about 3 or 4 minutes, which felt like an eternity, to make sure the wailing wouldn't come out. I didn't hear anything else, and nothing was outside the house anymore. And meanwhile, I was fighting the nausea that hadn't gone away. On the contrary, the fright had made it even worse. I was too scared to leave the bathroom. The wailing was heard from far away and finally stopped being heard. The cold and the physical discomfort started to disappear until they were completely gone. I still couldn't sleep. My friend woke at 8 o'clock and I stayed silent, afraid he'd think I was crazy if I told him. What impresses me the most in retrospect is that this happened in the early morning of November 2nd, the Day of the Dead. And just 2 blocks from his house, there's a sports complex with a river running through it. There are just too many coincidences: the date, the nearby water, the strange cold, and the discomfort that disappeared when the wailing stopped. Do you guys think I heard La Llorona? I checked local news and Facebook looking for any report of an assault or some incident that could explain the screams, but there was nothing. The work season is finally over and I don't plan to do it again. I'm afraid of what it could bring into my life. Since my grandmother used to say that hearing La Llorona is an omen of illness or death for the one who hears her. Thank you, Uriel, and thanks to everyone for listening to my story. Regards. Hello, Uriel. Very good evening. I'm writing to you from the city of Houston, Texas. I'm Itzel, a Mexican living here with my family. We arrived 4 years ago. Well, I did. My mom and siblings have been here longer. Thankfully, we can still visit Mexico, but for now, we live here. I'll tell you more about our life and other stories. Well, like I mentioned before, I lived 17 years of my life in Mexico, so we have plenty of scary stories from Mexico. Today, I want to share 2 stories about people who worked at funeral homes. The first one is about my uncle. His name was Leo, or at least that's what our family called him. He worked at a very famous funeral home near where we lived in the state of Puebla, in the Mixteca Baja Poblana region. His job was to transport the deceased to their destination, such as their home or a funeral home. He told us that once he had to take a little girl who had passed away there in Puebla, and he was going to take her to her home in Veracruz. My uncle began the journey in the hearse, transporting the girl already prepared for the wake. The trip was going well, everything was calm. It was early morning and my uncle was traveling on the highway. When he was almost entering Veracruz, he told us that in a moment of distraction, he heard noises in the back, although he didn't want to give it much importance. He looked through the rearview mirror. Everything seemed fine, but when he looked back at the road, he braked almost instantly. A little girl was standing in the middle of the road. My uncle swerved off the road to avoid her, so he wouldn't hit her, and luckily he managed to steer back onto the road in time. Nothing worse happened. He looked in the rearview mirror at the road to see if the girl was still there, but there was no one. The road looked empty. My uncle says that at that moment he felt something strange all over his body, a fear he had never felt before. Already near his destination, he got back on the road and continued. On arriving in Veracruz at the wake site, my uncle helped carry the body down. Quickly, the relatives only opened the section with the standing glass to see the deceased, and my uncle unintentionally saw her. It was her. It was the girl who had been on the road at dawn. My uncle had never seen her before. He only knew it was a girl because other co-workers prepared her, and he was just responsible for taking her. But when he realized that she was the same one he had seen that dawn until then, he felt an indescribable fear. All that time he had thought, was it a lost girl on the road, someone who lived nearby, or just an attempt to rob him, nothing more? This was one of the many reasons why my uncle decided to quit that job. He couldn't take it. He used to say that job wasn't for everyone, that it was only for those with a strong mind and soul, or for those who get used to it, but he never could. My uncle passed away 5 years ago, and I miss him with all my heart, but I like to remember him through that story that today I have the pleasure of sharing with you. Thank you. The second story comes from another person who also works at a funeral home, very different from my uncle's. During the pandemic, the father of a very dear friend passed away. You might recall that back then they wouldn't let you open coffins due to the virus. They arrived sealed in heavy plastic. That happened to my friend's father too. They gave us instructions that we could hold a wake, but under no circumstances were we to approach the coffin, much less try to remove the plastic to open it. The burial day finally arrived. The hearse arrived to transport the body, while those of us who were accompanying would walk behind it to the cemetery. The driver didn't know the way, so they asked me to ride with him and give directions, which I did. I decided to get closer and make conversation with the man. The basics. How long had he worked there? And was he afraid of his job? He answered me no, because over time you get used to it, of course, if you can. Very curious, I asked him, "Hey, has anything ever scared you while doing this?" He laughed, since I think I asked him something obvious, and he answered yes. I immediately asked if he could tell me a story, and then he started. He says he once had to pick up a body arriving from the United States at the Mexico City airport. They delivered the box to the funeral home around 6 or 7 p.m. The person's destination was southern Puebla, making it about an 8-hour trip. To get there, He had to take a very lonely road full of curves and hills, a road that leads to Oaxaca. He says that around 11 at night, when there were about 2 hours left to arrive, he started hearing noises. From the back, not noises from outside, but from inside the trailer. They were loud and constant, like when you knock on a door, but with anger, as if someone alive was trapped in there. What? The road felt heavy and the truck had issues. The brakes wouldn't fully respond. Community. That's when I asked the Lord the question again, and he wasn't afraid. He smiled and told me, "No, daughter, once you learn the job, you know what to do." In these cases, I just spoke to the Lord and said, "Listen, we're almost at your house so you can be with your family again, so you can rest in peace. Please be calm. I promise we're almost there. Soon I'll be home again." He told me that he immediately stopped hearing noises. The road stopped feeling heavy, and the truck stopped having problems. People from Puebla know that about us. It's very common to talk to the dead, since they say they can still hear. People talk to them to prepare them for the moment of the wake. They say this makes them cooperate with what's done to them and become more compliant. Or, as in this case, when the funeral home director spoke to the deceased and things calmed down. Thank you, Uriel. And thank you, community, if this story ends up on the podcast. A hug, greetings. I want to take this pause to thank you for your patience. Honestly, I know that a lot of people need your stories in their days to escape from their problems for a little while. And I thank you for being so understanding and waiting for me in moments like this. I promise you that we're trying to improve, and we hope you'll notice. This new place, this new little corner at home to record, is almost finished, and it's coming along. I'll let you know when we're recording from there, hoping to improve the audio more and more each time. For you guys, if you hear some echo right now, it's because we're literally halfway done. So this recording probably has more echo than last year's. But that's going to change. It'll be fixed and get much better once it's finished. So don't worry if it doesn't sound perfect right now. You can still find my book in some bookstores, though not all carry it now, thanks to those who finished it. If you find or buy it or share its location, please do. Others are still searching. Let's share more stories tonight. Thank you. Hello, Uriel. I've been listening to you for about a year, and today I finally got the courage to tell you my story. I'm your fan from Peru. My name is Leah, and I live in a city called Oaxaca, in the center of the country. Since I was born, and for 15 years, my family and I lived in a rented house. It was never ours, but it was my childhood home and a house I'll never forget. It was a 2-story house. On the first floor lived my parents, my sisters, and I. On the second floor lived the owner, although she was hardly ever there because she lived in another city. The house was spacious, made of cement and brick, which always caught people's attention because all the other houses on the block were made of clay. I was about 4 years old when things started to happen. One night, I was in my room with one of my sisters. We had a bed and a shelf for our stuffed animals and dolls. Behind the shelf was a door leading to a passageway and the staircase to the second floor. My sister and I were playing on the bed when I saw a man come out from that door behind my toys. He was short, a bit chubby. He didn't run. He didn't make any noise. He just appeared. I looked at him and said to my sister, "Look, there's a man." She turned and saw him, didn't say anything, picked me up right away, and we went out to the living room. From there, we saw that same man cross from one door to another, but this time at an unnatural speed. Over the years, my sister and I talked about it many times, and we always agreed on the description. It wasn't our imagination. We both saw the same thing, and over time we understood that it wouldn't be the only experience. My older sister started to experience something much more intense. At night, she felt like someone was sitting on her bed. Then that weight would move down to her chest as if it was taking her breath away. She couldn't move or scream until she opened her eyes. In front of her, she saw a man dressed in a shirt and hat when she finally screamed. My parents would run into her room, but they never found anything. Of course, this didn't happen just once. It happened many nights in a row. It became so traumatic that she didn't want to sleep alone. She would ask me to stay with her because she was scared. My mom, desperate, prayed and sprinkled holy water throughout the house. And as often happens, things calmed down for a while, but something became clear over the years. That house didn't react the same way with everyone. They never hurt me. There were many times when I was left alone for hours, waiting for my parents to come back from work, and my sisters coming home from college never scared me. But if I saw them, it wasn't just one. Sometimes I saw a girl, other times a man, and sometimes a young guy. My parents told me that if I saw them, I shouldn't pay attention to them, that I should just leave the room, and that's what I did for years. Sometimes I heard them crying, other times I felt their presence, but they were never mean to me. It was different with visitors. Every relative who stayed over ended up experiencing something. They couldn't rest. They felt like someone was touching them. They heard noises. Some had things thrown at them. Kitchen utensils, stuffed animals, dolls. No one wanted to stay for long. One day an aunt visited with her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, and they used my sister's bed. That night, the guy was sleepless. The next day, he said he felt a hand brush his arm at dawn in the darkness, where he knew there was no one. He said it was a soft hand, like a woman's, and we hadn't told him anything. Of course, and obviously, he never came back. I got used to it. This house was my home for 15 years. I grew up there, and even though it sounds strange, I tell you they weren't bad to me. When we moved into our house, I swear it hurt to leave. Can I confess something to you? I've returned to that house alone a few times. I still have the key since the owner is rarely there. And every time I go in, that atmosphere is still there. The cold, the feeling that someone is watching you, as if time hasn't passed. That house was never empty. Good evening, Uriel and the Relatos de la Noche community. My name is Alexander. A few years ago, I moved to Guadalajara to study, coming from my hometown. Since I couldn't pursue my desired career, some friends invited me to live with them. They had a free room in their apartment. The place was between the Americana neighborhood and Santa Terre. It was an old, neglected apartment, typical of students who come and go without doing much maintenance. From the first time I went to see them, and I felt something strange and uneasiness that's hard to explain. But I urgently needed a place, and I agreed to stay. My room was small, of course, a single bed, a wardrobe, and barely enough space to walk. The door didn't have a lock once it got stuck, and they broke it to open it, so there was a circular hole that led straight to the living room. You could easily fit a hand through there. I have a very restless sleep. I usually wake up in the middle of the night, but the first night there, that wasn't what woke me up. A tingling sensation spread through my body. Half asleep and half awake, I saw a silhouette standing right next to the door. It looked like a thin man, a bit hunched over, of average height. He didn't move, he didn't make any noise, he was just there. I ignored it, thinking it was my imagination or a side effect of my medication. I turned over and tried to sleep. But the same thing happened the next night, and the next, and the next, and the next. Only each time it was in a different place, sometimes next to my bed, other times on the other side of the room. It never came closer, it never spoke over time, and now it's hard for me to say it. I got used to its presence almost at the end of the semester. While drinking in the living room one night, I asked if anyone had experienced anything strange in the apartment. One of my roommates looked at me and asked, "Have you never seen anything in your room?" I said no to see his reaction. He told me that from the living room, through the hole in the door, he often saw someone standing inside, and when he stayed, he only heard noises, as if someone was there. And that once, he even started talking from his room, thinking I was in mine. I had never told him what I saw. Shortly after, the room next door became available. It was a bit bigger, so I decided to move, and that's when everything got worse. I don't know if he didn't like being alone or if he had gotten used to me, but it seemed like he didn't want me to be in that other room. Every time I closed the door, he would come and bang on it. They weren't normal knocks, they were loud, desperate hits. My roommates never knocked like that. They would just shout from outside or simply open the door. Also, constant noises started to be heard. In the room I had left, sometimes for no reason, my Alexa would start playing my playlists. One day, cockroaches suddenly appeared only in my room out of nowhere, and I was feeling more and more tired. When I went back to my hometown, my mom would tell me that I looked sick, that I looked really bad, as if I wasn't eating. She even said I looked like I was dead. Things kept getting worse. Doors would slam shut and lights would turn off by themselves. I decided to look for another place as soon as possible, and, well, as soon as I moved, everything changed. The feeling of heaviness and tiredness disappeared. I slept better. I felt different every day. It seemed like I was getting back something I had lost. My classmates at school noticed it. They asked me what I was doing. They told me I looked much healthier. And today, I'm doing much better. I don't know what was in that apartment. I never saw it directly. It never spoke to me. I just know that something stayed with me there. And since I left, nothing has happened to me again. Hi community, I'm Adriana from Cancun, sharing my story for the second time. I have to confess that I hardly ever experience paranormal things, but what I'm about to tell you was definitely the most intense thing that's ever happened to me, and to this day it still affects me. It all happened in Mérida, Yucatan. My husband and I chose to spend New Year's there. We arrived on December 31st at 9 a.m. Since the Airbnb wouldn't let us in until 2 in the afternoon, we decided to go out for breakfast and kill some time. We visited the San Benito Market, a popular spot with food stalls, handicrafts, and more. While walking to a recommended breakfast spot, we passed a stall selling religious figurines. Among all of them, there was a figure of Santa Muerte, the size of an adult person. When I saw it, I said to my husband, "Look, honey, it's a really big figure." He just replied yes. We didn't make any other comments and went on with our day as usual. Everything was calm. We celebrated the new year, enjoyed ourselves, and went to sleep later that night. That's when it all happened. I dreamed that I was with my maternal grandmother and one of my aunts in the dream. I desperately asked them for help, telling them that something was tormenting me. At one point, I turned to my right and saw a long, dark hallway. From there, 3 figures began to appear, as if it were a scene from a horror movie. I tried to focus my sight and saw that one of them had a white face peeking out and staring at me intently. Soon after, the others appeared. I suddenly felt fear throughout my body as the scene changed. I was no longer with my grandmother or my aunt. Now I saw myself lying next to my husband in the Airbnb where we were sleeping. And the scariest part was that I felt like I was no longer dreaming, that everything had become real, that I was seeing my body. My husband was sleeping on his back. I saw how something was lifting him up while at the same time covering his mouth. It looked like he was suffocating. At that moment, I clearly saw a shadow sitting on the bed. I wanted to scream, I wanted to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt a desperation I had never experienced before. Suddenly, something squeezed me, my ankles burned, and I felt pulled. I turned my gaze toward my feet and saw that figure. I felt like it was pulling me toward it. I turned to look at my husband and saw fear on his face. I saw him struggling to breathe, as if that shadow wanted to take him too. At that moment, the only thing I thought was that if someone had to go, let it be me and not him. And right after that thought, I woke up. I was able to open my eyes. My husband sat up immediately and started coughing really hard. A few days earlier, he had already been coughing and had a cold, so I didn't connect it to my dream at the time. I asked if he was okay. He said yes and went back to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep immediately. My heart was racing, and what scared me the most was that my ankles were really burning. Also, I was lying on my back, exactly like in the dream. I prayed, which was the only way I calmed down and eventually fell back asleep. The next day, I told my husband everything and began to cry as I spoke. And the truth is, it really was the most intense dream I've ever had. When I finished, he told me in a very serious voice that he had also had a nightmare that night. A terrible nightmare. He didn't want to tell me more, but I'm sure that something happened to both of us, that those dreams weren't normal. Until now, I don't know what happened or why. I don't think I did anything wrong or disrespected anything. I just know that now I see things differently. Now more than ever, I will respect all the beliefs I don't understand, and I won't make a single comment about them. Thank you, Uriel, for the space. Thank you to the community for listening to me, and have a lot of respect for Santa Muerte. Good night.